Forge makes products for people's gardens and homes. We focus on mainly garden sculptures, sometimes with a function like bird baths, but the whole idea is that it's a beautiful thing in the garden that is of use. I run the business on my own, although I do have people working for me occasionally. Currently, I have an apprentice who was full-time apprentice for a couple of years, but has now gone on to do a full-time apprenticeship at the dockyard in Portsmouth, which I'm really proud of. I also work with other artists, so work with glass artists and ceramicists. When I first moved in, this was a beautiful, empty, clean room. There was nothing in here, and apart from there were some leaks in the roof because someone had stolen the lead off the roof. On the site, this is the pumping station at Portsmouth, there is a big chimney, and I just felt that we got the biggest chimney in town and I had to get planning permission to put my little one up. But still, I got planning permission, thankfully, and was able to set up and get going. And it's been a good workspace since then. The welding elements on, making some wings, making little antennae, welding them on, and then welding them onto their stem. Now, don't weld one side of one of the pieces just in case something goes funny with the glass, and it means I can move that bar ever so slightly to put the glass in, because it's what I would call a tack fuse. So this little chap has wings, find him a set of wings. And then he gets antennae. Haven't quite got to a smiley face yet on them, but we're well on our way. And last but not least is flight path. Okay. So each year I'm developing new little products, and the little bumblebee is this year's little newbie. It comprises of a piece of fused glass, a little bit of forge work on the steel, welded together. Aim of most things we make is affordable art. So we're always trying to create something that has got a range of skills in it and is super appealing, but also is affordable. So I'm just getting my points marked out. So we're going to do this double loop, but first of all I form the two end pieces, and then I just do a crossover heat on this. This is all done on the induction. That's forming our initial loop. These are called scroll dogs, and that's doing the job of what's known as an anvil horn. Usually they're coming out the hardy hole, but in a vise is nice and convenient. So that's my one loop, which I'm now going to heat again and forge. Just giving it a bit of a flat. so that you're not just got a round bar. And this is where I say just putting some forge work in everything. So the next bit gets the same treatment. Working fairly close to the edge of the anvil so that the hammer can actually go over the edge, allowing me to thin that out. If I was working here, I'm more likely to hit the anvil and damage it, so just try and keep close to the edge. Not too fond of getting too close to it. Okay, I'm going to cut this off with the grinder. It's still hot at the moment, just out of interest. When it's red, it's obviously hot, but when it's black, it's still very hot. So, and it can be up to, well, in a light forge like this, it could probably be up to about 600 degrees and you wouldn't see the red. So you've got to be wary all the time. This is the incredible thing about the induction, is that you can actually handle the work so close to where your heat is. I'll just keep pulling this around. That's it. So we're beginning to get our little wings, but the heat is beginning to get to me now. So. It is conducting along there, but it's just usually you get enough working time compared to having to use tongs to hold everything. So that's a lot easier than working with tongs. You can get quite a bit of bending done with the scroll dogs without heat, so you can adjust things cold. Heat gives you that nice sharp bend or something that you need to forge, but sometimes just cold gives you the little bit of shaping you need. So that's our little wings, ready to go on another bee. I trained as a teacher at Goldsmiths College in design technology, so woodwork, metalwork and plastics. So I've always worked with wood and metal in particular. I mean, we had to use plastics, electronics and all sorts of other things, but the main materials have been working with wood and metal. Over the years, so I worked in various schools, but I was always seemed to be involved in setting up new departments because design and technology was a new thing on the national curriculum. So in particular, some of the independent schools didn't have any woodworking or metalworking facilities, so they were introducing this new modern subject. And in the end, I had the joy of setting up a whole brand new department in a girls' school. So they had a design and technology facility that they've been using for a few years, but they were building a whole new building, allowing particularly GCSE and A-level students to get their hands on most sort of metalwork tools and woodworking tools. I've since left there, and unfortunately design and technology has now sort of not quite dropped out of the curriculum, but the resistant materials aspect has. We no longer have these facilities, and even the school that I left in 2012 has got rid of the equipment and moved into a smaller classroom. And unfortunately this is happening all across Portsmouth for definite, and I should imagine throughout the country, which is a great sadness for all those kids who love making things, because they're not getting the opportunities, they're not even discovering that they'd like to make something, because they don't get to see it. I, on the lucky side, help out at some schools which do have facilities. When I decided to set up a workshop, I was working in a school as a full-time teacher. So I sacked myself and they replaced me with a new head of department, and I became this tiny little part-time post that I used to have that was a devil to fill, and I took that role on. And that enabled me to retrain as a blacksmith. So although I'd taught metalwork for many years, what I hadn't really done was hot metal, which is where you're heating it up and working it hot. I've always worked with copper, and I did work with steel, but generally using levers and things to move it rather than heat. So I went off to Hereford, trained in Hereford for a year with the basic skills, came back because I could only take 1 year off from the school, came back, continued my job at the school, and was looking for somewhere to work. Now the school was in Portsmouth and I lived in Portsmouth, so I had to find a workshop in Portsmouth. So I asked around, and I was really lucky that this building had just been vacated and they were looking for new tenants for it, and I got in, and I was exceedingly lucky. I was in the right place at the right time, and it's a wonderful place to work. So you can get around most problems with the induction still, but the fire is nice. It's, as I say, it's superb and we get away with a lot on it, but I want to get to the point, not where we don't use coke, because there will always be a place for coke in that if it's a really awkward big shape, if you're halfway through it. Because there's a point, if you don't think your project through properly, you can't get it onto the coil or something. But there are different types of coil. But having said that, the joy of being able to come in and think, oh, I need this, quickly heat it, forge it and get out the door in the time that it takes to light this does make, every now and again you just look at the induction and you go, this is amazing. So, if you know the saying, too many irons in the fire, that comes from, it's easy to work 2 or 3, but if you start going to 4 or 5, by the time you've finished and move on to your next piece, one could be burning. So, and then in a minute we'll strike whilst the iron's hot. I'm going to make a round taper for a tail for one of the Stingray. So now that's a lovely bright heat. So I'm just putting a taper on the end of here. The hotter you get it, the easier it is to make it move. So less work on your part. But any minute now I'm going to go to the power hammer because I don't stay by hand for long. But it is nice having the heat. I do like it. Bit of intense heat is a favourite. So I'm going to finish this off by hand, just going along each of the ridges that have been created by the octagon. One of the things is to keep your forge work as clean as possible. Okay, so when you're scrolling work up, you're looking at the negative space all the time, and So if you try and follow the bar that you're actually bending, it's hard to see the actual shape. Whereas if you look at the space it leaves behind, it's much easier to see the shape and how you're progressing. I'll quench it for the sake of it. But to be truly honest, try never to quench anything unless you need it for the job. The kids love it at school. They love quenching their work. They will heat something up and quench it just for the fun of it. We're in the middle of doing a very large set of stingrays for a customer. This is a commission, but it is also part of our product range. But the customer had a specific need for their garden, so it's easy to adapt and make to suit their need. And that's the beauty about coming to us and getting things made, is that yes, we have standard products, but I have no problem adapting them to be exactly what you need for your own home. So if somebody wanted, I don't know, a chandelier with bees coming down from a high ceiling or something like that, we can make it. And it doesn't cost terrifically more than the little thing that you see, because you're paying for time and materials. That's how I charge. And so if the elements are very similar, but we're just changing its location, changing the length of the bar that's holding in a position or whatever, the price doesn't go up atrociously. This was the initial drawing I drew. By the time you start making the components up, they don't quite go the same, and you adapt things. You've got your cutting list, you cut your bits to the lengths that you require them. Then you start shaping, and these are my sort of main formers, so I just know that I'm getting the right sort of shape. This has been fire welded together at each end. Turn out ever so slightly longer, because when you're fire welding you can actually draw that out a bit, so I've had to trim some of these off in some cases. Then give it some shaping, and then it is welded onto the base shape like that. And then we've got what we call the moustaches. They're not supposed to be, it's that underside of trying to give the underside of the stingrays. So that's that goes underneath there. So that's our underside of the stingray. And then we weld the tail on. So the tail is another element that's been forged. So you've got a forged taper and a forged flat part there, and then once welded together, check everything, make sure it takes the glass, because what we don't want to do is go and get it galvanised and then have to adjust it again afterwards. So everything needs to fit at this stage and everything. So even when we assemble the whole sculpture, we've got to check there's room for the glass to be. And in the case of the little mini stingrays, you've got to have room for this glass to be, but what you're welding is just a load of sticks. So it looks like a load of stick insects before you actually put the glass in. I mean, the first time we made one of these, I was trying to envisage where the glass would be whilst welding the thing together, and it was looking okay, it's looking okay, but the moment we put the glass in, the thing just came to life. And then all of a sudden this much more three-dimensional sculpture came out. It was like, oh, like that. And we quickly decided to make more than the one that we were making. So I've made stainless steel formers, and they slumped into shape. So first of all, we got clear glass. These actual glass pieces have been made by a glass artist I work with, Elisa Dodd. And she's got clear glass, and she takes stuff called frit, which is finely ground glass, and it comes in like granular like sugar, or very fine like icing sugar. So you get it in different forms, and you get it quite chunky as well. So the fine powder is put all over the clear glass, and then these are the little chunky bits put on, and then that's put in a kiln and fused, and it gives you a flat piece of glass but coloured. And then take the coloured glass and put a flat piece of glass onto there, and then heat it up just enough that the glass begins to sag, but not so much that it's melting it. And that's what gives us our form. So all the bowls and everything we produce all starts as clear glass and is treated in this way. So there's a couple of, you've got your first fuse to give you your actual coloured shaped piece of glass, and then the second fuse gives you the 3-dimension. The beauty of handmade by the person that's in front of you, and when we're at the shows we're trying to get this message across all the time. We make this stuff. Yes, you can buy what's just here, but on the other hand, if it doesn't quite suit you, then we make it to suit you, because that's why we're here.